Every year, billions of dollars vanish. Lives are ruined, families shattered, and it all starts with one text.
Hey, are you picking me up at the airport?
Welcome to Stolen, hosted by former prosecutor Erin West, a relentless voice exposing the brutal truth behind transnational organized crime and one of the most dangerous and underreported crimes in the world, pig butchering scams. These are not random frauds. They're global, organized, and devastating. Victims aren't just losing money, they're losing hope. This is the podcast where the silence breaks. Stolen. And now your host, Erin West.
Hi, friends, and welcome to Stolen. I'm excited about today's episode because we're going to change the topic a little bit. We've been talking in depth about pig butchering. We've been talking in depth about transnational organized crime. We're still going to talk about transnational organized crime, but we're going to talk about a different flavor of the kind of bad activity they do. And I'm here with a true expert in the field. I am excited to introduce you to Alison Jimenez, and she is a money movement expert. She is an anti-money laundering expert. She testifies before Congress. She speaks all over the world. And she, in the last few years, has really taken, I don't want to say taken an interest in sextortion, but has become the premier expert on how sextortion money is moving. And I'm delighted to have her here today so that she can explain this to all of us on a kindergarten level, what she does and how she learned this and how she can help us understand the best ways to go about slowing down and adding friction to the way that these bad actors are accessing our people and moving their money. So Alison, welcome. Thank you so much for being here today.
Great. It's wonderful to be here with you, Erin. Yeah, I've been listening to all the podcasts. I'm happy to chime in with a little more in depth on the financial sextortion scamdemic that's happening across the globe, not just in the U.S., but especially harmful to our teenagers and young boys.
Yeah. And as a mom of, my boys are 18 and 21 now, this definitely was a big issue in my house while they were here. They're both in college now, but definitely sextortion, because we knew it was happening. This is one of those things that's so much like pig butchering in that the scammers have found a really embarrassing way of extracting money out of people. And teenage boys definitely do not want to talk about this. But I made it my business to talk to my boys and their friends about this because it's so common.
It is. That was one of the shocking things to me when I started looking into it, because first, the things that bubble to the surface are the awful suicide stories of the teenage boys who end up taking their lives. But once you get beyond that, and that is the minority of cases where that happens, there's so many more. For every one child who takes their life, there's thousands more who were victimized that never talked to anyone, that never told their parents or any adult or even a friend what happened to them. So I started with the headlines, as most people do, and then had to work my way back to understand how the scheme worked, who was conducting it. As an economist who works in the financial crime space, to understand how the money moves, because in the financially motivated sextortion area, this is a financial crime. They are doing this to get money. They're doing it to get money from kids. They're also extorting adults. But my focus has mainly been on kids, but I'm certainly happy to talk about it's the second most reported crime last year. The IC3 was extortion, and about 2/3 of those were sexual extortion. So it's not just the kids they're targeting, but that's where my focus has been because it's so impactful and traumatizing, and I wanted to stop. And I know you do too.
Yeah, so we will get deep into it, but let's start off with you and your story and how you got where you were today. Tell me about the early days of your career.
Sure. So I started off, I'm located in Florida. I started off as a securities regulator here in the state of Florida. That was just kind of my first job out of school, where they would hire someone who's 22 with an economics degree. Didn't know that much about securities, but in Florida, you get thrown into the deep end of fraud and scams and elder abuse, because that's what we have here, is old people being taken advantage by scammers. So that trained me for a lot of my career. Also did a little bit of audits and exams. So I got to see what legitimate enterprises should look like as well. So I did that for a few years. And then I went in-house at a good sized broker dealer that happens to be located in Florida. And I worked in their legal department, which is kind of strange. I'm not a lawyer. I'm an economist. I do math for lawsuits. Lawyers, they can't. Usually they're not that great at math. Some are, but most
We
are
don't
not.
like math. No, we don't like math.
And
We
they
like to
can't
talk.
they can't test them about their own math. So when there was a Ponzi scheme or a market manipulation scheme, I would have to figure out how much money was stolen or where the money went, or was there some market manipulation scam. So I would do all the math that was involved for lawsuits. And even with a reputable firm, there's still plenty of, children who take advantage of their elderly parents or people who think they're investing in something that turns out to be false promises. So that was, again, heavy on the math side. But I did start doing my first testimony work, having to go to trial and explain my math and document everything very clearly and be able to support it with facts, which I think, well, for folks who read my blog, you will see I footnote everything. If I'm going to use a number, I explain it. If I'm going to do math, I'm going to show it. And that's just kind of, I think, part of how my career path went, that I had to show, you have to show my work. Like your fifth grade math teacher, you have to show your work and, base
I
it
think that's a big part of why you have such a strong reputation, is that you've got your evidence backed, your data backed. Everything you say, you can substantiate. And I think in a world where there's a lot of unknowns, we don't know how big things are, we don't know how much is moving, being able to show evidence or at least make estimates based on data matters.
Sure. And before I get to a point of writing about sextortion, there's months of legwork and research that go into it. So I think we'll get into that in a bit. But I occasionally have opinions off the cuff, but I usually try and have some thorough understanding of what I'm looking at before I publish something. So went from the large broker dealer, and then I actually started my own business more than 20 years ago. So lucky me, I've been working remotely for 20 plus years, doing, again, litigation consulting, but also compliance consulting. Financial institutions have their AML audit requirements they're required to do to look at a software tool for AML purposes. And I'm pretty good looking at the math side or turning a law into logic. So kind of being that translator between law and math or math and technology. So that's kind of my sweet spot in there is bridging those gaps.
So break that down more for me, who is just getting into the finance space of this, and try help me understand what exactly that means on a day-to-day.
Okay. So I'll just go with the sextortion topic of how do the money flows work and where do I get that information from? There's been some great information from the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and that comes from victim complaints and social media. That's one data source, and I'm going to use that data source. But other data sources would be IC3 complaints to the FBI, and then I'll compare against each other. So, well, there's IC3 data collecting information that targets the younger folks because, if you're 14, are you going to go to IC3? To find your way to missing and exploited children data. So I try to look at different data sources. And then the third one within the sextortion, we've actually in the US had some success, at least bringing charges and in some cases extraditing folks. So I would go into pacer.gov and try and find all the actual indictments and arrest warrants and extradition requests that had factual case-backed evidence that they were using for their cases to understand how the bad guys were demanding payment, how they were moving it among co-conspirators, what they were using the funds for, how are they remitting overseas, where overseas were these folks that were conducting the fraud. So I was trying to get some on-the-ground source information and then also pull information from different areas that folks might report to.
How long ago did you begin your study of financially motivated sextortion?
So it actually, that wasn't what I meant to look at. I meant to look at how cryptocurrency was used in commercial CSAM, which is child sexual abuse material. So I was writing a white paper on that in 2023. And when I was writing a paper on that, I was thinking more about the dark markets that sell videos and images and even live streaming. But as I was doing that research, I kept coming across these stories that were getting caught up in my, Google alerts of financial sextortion, which really hadn't been on my radar. But also some of the self-generated images of children who are taking selfies, whether they think they're in a relationship or whether they're being blackmailed or whether they're victimized in some other way. Some of those images end up on commercial CSAM websites. So I was trying to figure out where are these images coming from, if it's financial sextortion, who is doing this. So that's kind of how it got on my radar in 2023. And then once I realized the scale of the problem, that these are just, they're not outliers. The suicides that make the news, those are the ones that catch your attention. But once I understood how many more children were behind those numbers, that's when I finished my white paper on cryptocurrency and CSAM in general, and then started focusing on specifically financial motivated sextortion. Because at that point, there wasn't a financial analysis that had been done of the full scale. There was some data on, again, the victim payments from NCMEC data, and NCMEC, again, is National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. But there wasn't a study of, well, these are how victims pay. But the bad guys, the perpetrators, are usually in Nigeria, West Africa, Ivory Coast. They can't use those funds there. So how do I needed to follow all the steps, like understanding the victim payments. That was important. And then I did go into that at length. But then the next movements, how do you get those funds to Nigeria, was important to me to understand, and all the different products and financial institution types and financial assets that were being used. That was something I wanted to scope out. So all the folks who have that are touched by this crime have a way to understand where their institution fits, whether you're a bank, whether you're a crypto company, whether you're a traditional MSB, whether you're a crypto ATM. I wanted to map all of that out. And at that point, we'd only known that, peer-to-peer payments were how the victims were generally paying in addition to gift cards.
Oh, so I love being inspired by people I talk to, because I remember when I first talked to you about this, and I remember thinking, I wish this was part of my day-to-day, because I find it fascinating. And so I guess it's second best that it gets to be part of my day-to-day to learn from someone like you. So can you walk through just what a standard, if there is a standard sextortion situation, how that plays out?
Sure. And I'll walk through, for folks who aren't as familiar, I'll walk through what it looks like from the sextortion experience and also the financial experience.
Please, yes.
It's a term that people might not be familiar with. It is rapidly growing since 2021. So I'm going to talk about a typical experience for a teenage U.S. American boy, how they experience sextortion, which about 1 out of 3 teenage American boys have at least been targeted, which is, again, bananas.
These are crazy numbers, and this is why we need to talk about it. And this is why we need to normalize that you are going to be targeted in this way.
Yes. So normal teenage U.S. boy is going to be on Instagram. He is going to get a friend request from a age-appropriate, cute girl. They may have friends in common already, and that might be because that perpetrator on the other end already blasted everyone on his school or everyone on a sports team, and all it takes is 1 or 2 friends in common, and they're like much more likely to accept a friend because, well, she knows 3 of my teammates or 3 of my classmates. Or the perpetrator may have bought a hacked account or hacked into the account themselves. So they're not always fresh Instagram accounts of girls. Some of them are existing accounts that had been hacked. So the teenage boy accepts the friend request, and they start chatting there. And similar to when your pig butchering scenarios, the communication changes to a second platform. They usually change to Snapchat. That's, again, the kids are under the assumption or belief that images and messages disappear on Snapchat. It's not correct if you have a second phone or computer to take an image of that message. But they start on Instagram because you can see if you accept a friend, the perpetrator can see all your other friends and connections. So that's important to start there because they want to know who those people are so they can blackmail that kid with knowing who to threaten the image to. If someone has an image of you, but they don't know who you are or who to share it with, it's a lot less threatening of knowing my soccer team's going to see this picture, my parents are going to see this picture, and they collect that information on Instagram. They go to Snapchat to make the conversation flirty. The perpetrator will send what the child thinks is an intimate image of the girl, saying, here's my picture, now it's your turn, send me one back. And the boy does, or maybe they do a streaming video, and the perpetrator records it. And as soon as they have that image, it's a very fast crime. It's a very fast moving from that initial contact of messaging. It could be minutes or hours. But once they get that intimate image of the teenage boy, they immediately go to blackmailing the child for money under the threat of releasing the image, publishing it to your friends, family, schoolmates on social media, unless you pay them. And they'll sometimes put together a collage. Here's pictures of all your teammates. Here's your girlfriend. Here's your parents. They know exactly who they're threatening to put together. Sometimes they'll even put like a group chat and put it to, here's the group chat I put together to send it out to, unless you pay me. And they're very specific about how to pay. They will demand, and this is where we get into the financial side. Up to
Before
this
we
point,
jump to financial, let me ask a couple questions. So, do you think that when the chat moves from Instagram to Snapchat, that gives the teenage boy a false belief that this photograph is not going to be retained? Is that why they go to Snapchat?
yes, I believe that's why. It doesn't always. Sometimes they stay in Instagram. Sometimes it happens in Facebook. But the primary, because we do have some good reporting information to NCMEC about where these originate and the switching of platforms. It doesn't always happen, but I think that's why they do have scripts and playbooks. Again, there's so many similarities to pig butchering. One from switching one line of communication to another, having scripts and playbooks on how to do this successfully is another. And there's tips like, well, move it over here, and this is why you move it over to this other platform to get the comfort level that it won't be shared.
Yeah, I saw that you had a LinkedIn post about the similarities between pig butchering and sextortion, and it is amazing. I mean, they're both being done on an industrialized level. They're both primarily money grabs, almost exclusively money grabs. That's why they're doing it. And they really rely on gaining the trust of another person, and they're experts at gaining that trust.
Yeah, I think with the kids, the perpetrator sends a picture first. Well, now you owe me. Now I have to send one, and that's trying to engender trust with the child victim. Moving it to Snapchat, it's more trustworthy that they won't be sharing, or I'll get an alert if they take a screenshot, not realizing there's a second, third, fourth, phone taking images of or video of the interactions.
So I stopped you midway. You were about to tell me how the financial piece works.
Sure. And once they get the image and they start threatening the child, they're very specific about how they want the money. Need to collect funds, and they are willing to accept any way that the child is able to send it to. But they have their preferences. Their first preferences are peer-to-peer, and those peer-to-peer, Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, Apple Pay, Google Pay, all the big names. The bad guys have figured out how to have money mule accounts at all of these platforms. So they certainly have.
Let me stop you right there in case my Aunt Terry doesn't know what a money mule account is. Tell us what a money mule account is.
So a money mule account, and most of them I've seen have been complicit. These are folks who are willingly in the United States serving as collection agents for the perpetrators overseas, where they open accounts in their names, or maybe a fake name, or take over an account. These people collect the funds, and then at the direction of the perpetrator will move it to other bank accounts, to other financial services firms, to another account within that same peer-to-peer platform to make it worthwhile to at one big lump sum to remit the funds overseas. So there are often, but not always, implicit folks getting a 20% cut, which is a pretty high cut compared to other schemes. But every once in a while, there are, especially in this space, there are both teen victims who don't have any money to pay or don't have any more money to pay, who are then coerced into serving as money mules. Say, I will release this picture unless you allow other folks to send money to your Venmo account, or you allow other folks to send money to you on Cash App or any other ones. There are also instances of unwitting folks who thought they were in a relationship with a scammer, and that's where you kind of get into romance scam folks who are, well, they think they're helping out their loved one overseas by receiving funds into their accounts. There's a variety of mules, implicit, coerced, or willing, or unwilling, but they are all serving that same purpose of being the person on the ground in the United States, collecting the funds and following the directions of the perpetrator to get it to them.
Okay, so teenager is going to send money. If he has access to Cash App, Venmo, Zelle, he's going to send it to likely a money mule account that is collecting from probably different teenagers all over the country. Is that right?
Exactly. So they each one of these cases, they have thousands of victims. And those are the victims who paid. So for each victim who paid, there's about 3 others who exchanged an intimate image who didn't pay. So those bad guys still have those images, which is also a really scary thing to think about as a parent and as a country. Where are those images? At what point do our enemies weaponize those images?
My goodness.
I call this direct financial impact to the kids in the moment. Those images are out there, even for the ones who don't. But the other portion is about 25% of time is gift cards, because some of these victims are so young. They don't even have those yet. They are directed to ride their bicycle to Target or Walmart to buy a gift card. Or they're directed to, oh, your parents are buying video games. You can buy a gift card within the video game. Just tell your mom you're, buying a new game and send me the gift card value, or send me email me the link to the code for the gift card. So for kids who don't even have those peer-to-peer accounts, which again, not to demonize those peer-to-peer accounts, they're very useful, and that's what kids prefer to use. That you're not going to see a 16-year-old writing a check or sending a wire. That's what they're used to doing, and that was something I had to learn as part of my research. Well, why are these the methods that are demanded by the bad guys? It's because they know who the victim is. Their victim are teenage boys. They're not asking for Lululemon gift cards because they're not targeting teenage girls. Teenage boys play video games. Most boys have a peer-to-peer method. Maybe they get their allowance via Apple Pay. A lot of parents do that. And that's, again, on the face of it, there's nothing wrong, but we can talk about at the end, like how the payment platforms could set up a more secure product for children. And that's something I had to understand why they were doing this route of money movement before I could make recommendations. And now that I did all that legwork, I have recommendations.
And why are they targeting boys?
That's a question I get a lot. And the best answer I have is that boys are not warned about predators trying to collect intimate images from them. Girls have been warned about that. Girls and women have been targeted for this from bad actors for a long time. Girls are still targeted for this, but the bad actors are mainly trying to get more explicit images. For the boys, the perpetrators are doing this for money. So it's a different game. It's a different motivation. And I think the boys just haven't been warned that they could be victimized in this way. And it is a new crime. And I think, things like this will help us get the word out to parents, and maybe they can then have a conversation with their kids to warn them. Girls are also being targeted, but it's for more images. Boys are being targeted for money.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so now how much money are they asking for? Is there a general dollar value they go after?
Sure.
What are these scammers able to take?
Yeah, it's about on average about $300. On the high end, I've seen as high as $3,000. They've managed to get out of a minor that kids just actually don't have that much access to funds. Usually it's $75, $100, or I have a $30 Apple gift card I can send you, and I got $50 from grandma from Christmas, and I'll ride my bike to go buy another gift card. So it's a low dollar, but that's also, I think, why there's such a scattershot wide approach. Instead of in the pig butchering romance scam where they're getting hundreds of thousands of dollars and it's over weeks or months, this is a very quick return, low dollar for each individual transaction. But that's why they have so many victims. But in the cases that made it through the court process here, the dollar amounts cumulatively, both cases around 2 million. I think one was 1.9 million. Another case was 2.5 million. But if you think about each victim is only $300 per person, that's thousands of victims that paid, and then multiples of thousands who were victimized.
And those are the ones we know about.
Yes, the ones we know about, and so many that we don't. But then walking through okay, well, this is how the victims paid. Now, what are you going to do with all these $300 payments? Got some in money in Cash App, some money in Google Pay. You have a gift card. What do you do with that? And you're based in Nigeria, or you're in the Ivory Coast. Like, how do you get that money back across seas? That's where, in every instance, there are the money mules that we talk about. The people who are here in the U.S. who are working at the behest of these transnational criminal organizations. And their job is to consolidate those funds. Two main ways they consolidate it. Either they consolidate the funds into a peer-to-peer, they move it from the various peer-to-peer into one centralized peer-to-peer, especially peer-to-peer that also lets you buy cryptocurrency. You're going to hear me say the word cryptocurrency a lot in this talk. And that's how I started, because a cryptocurrency is how they remit the funds to Nigeria in the Nigerian model. So some peer-to-peer platforms, you can both do peer-to-peer. And
Who is it now? Who's allowing you to buy crypto from
like
peer-to-peer?
go through Cash App and Venmo. Venmo is also owned by the same company as PayPal. If I'm using the wrong holding company name, I apologize, but both of those you can do both peer-to-peer and purchase cryptocurrency through the organization. And it's interesting, both of them also allow teenagers to invest in cryptocurrency. Some are changing their rules and policies now in response to this. So if it's updated since this airs, again, as a parent, it's interesting. You think you're just allowing your kid to do a peer-to-peer payment and you don't realize, oh gosh, once I let them allowed to do that, they can also trade crypto. But also as a parent, if your kid has a job bagging groceries and they have a checking account, most banks automatically enroll them in Zelle. There's not an opt-out button or an opt-in button. They're just in it. That guy knows your kid's phone number or your email address. They can look it up and send a demand via Zelle to teenagers. There's no privacy controls for most of those banks. So again, that's something I'm going to be.
Gosh, I think I know a lot of things and I don't know these things. Okay, so you're telling me that if someone gets a hold of a kid's phone number, now that I think it through, yeah, that's a sufficient way to request payment.
Yeah, or you can do it through Apple, which is another, you can demand. There's some of these apps, like they're so helpful and handy, but then also it exposes so information. So if I'm threatening the child through iMessages, and now I know their phone number, I can also demand an Apple Pay through that. When they're all rolled together, that one piece of information can be used to track down what payment methods a kid has available. So it's yeah.
So ideally, then there's an account that's the receiving account for a bunch of this, and that account's going to convert it to crypto.
Yes, and sometimes they may also move all the funds into a bank account and then wire those funds to a crypto exchange and buy crypto. But there's.
I was going to say, do you have? So they're still going to wire. They're going to wire it to a bank, but they're still going to buy crypto with it.
Yes.
Is it from what you found? Is it generally almost always that this money's going to go to crypto and that's how it gets transferred to Africa?
If it's a Nigeria organized crime scheme, and this is why it actually makes a difference whether it's Ivory Coast or Nigeria. So I watched
your videos on this. Yes.
Every single instance of Nigeria, it's always crypto and it's always Bitcoin specifically. I'll be interested to see if they eventually switch to a stable coin. But right now, historically, it's been Bitcoin. And they're buying the crypto at U.S. exchanges. They're sending it to an unhosted wallet. A couple of hops later, they'll make it to either Nigerian exchange or a peer-to-peer platform. Now, the cases that happen in Ivory Coast, and if we go forward, there's no reason these crimes will stay in those two countries. But if your country of origin does not have a big crypto scene, that option is not on the table. And for Ivory Coast, they don't have really right now a big crypto scene. So in those cases, they have to do more traditional international money laundering, where the money mule will consolidate the funds into a bank, and then they'll either physically take out cash and walk into Western Union or MoneyGram and do a traditional cross-border payment through a traditional MSB, or they'll take the money out in cash and go into a Hualadir, which is a usually unlicensed money transmitter who it's based on trust. I'm in New York, my cousin's in Ivory Coast. I'll take the money and my cousin in Ivory Coast will give you the currency equivalent there. But with all those gift cards we talked about too, for the kids who don't have money, they will buy high-priced goods to export. So all those, gift cards are being turned into iPhones or headphones or watches. And that's a very slow process to eventually get it overseas to Ivory Coast. But they're willing to do that. That's another way that they are getting the funds overseas. But if there's crypto, that's so much easier.
It's way easier, but they're making it work. If they're Ivory Coast, they're gonna. Wow. Okay. So I'm thinking about it from an investigatory standpoint, and I'm like, okay, well, there's a lot of opportunities to get information. If you are sending it to someone, if you are boxing up iPhones and shipping it to someone, there's evidence on both ends of that. Whereas crypto, if done correctly, there's a lot of potential anonymity.
Yeah. The amount of legwork, and when I walk through the case studies, when I do my presentation, it is a tremendous amount of legwork that the law enforcement has to do. They're subpoenaing, Google to get the names behind the accounts. They did have in the cases that have gone forward, they've had good cooperation with the crypto exchanges, but it's still a subpoena process. They're not just handing over the information. They to get the KYC from Binance Nigeria, which did turn over the perpetrator's passport, which to me was interesting that he didn't bother to use a fake passport or to have a mule open the account. And they thought that they could just get away with doing this and not even, try to hide their identity. That was enlightening. So hopefully that
Super interesting, because I think for a while they haven't needed to hide their identity. I mean, this has been going on for at least 2 years that you've been studying it, and nobody's come for them yet.
yeah, they are starting to come for them. So that was some. There are areas of progress. Like this crime escalated so quickly, and just to emphasize that for your audience, if they have not heard of this crime, back in 2021. Just 4 years ago, there was only 139 complaints of financial sextortion of minors that were filed with NCMEC. Fast forward to 2024, there was over 36,000. Like,
My goodness.
that's straight up. So if you weren't aware of it in 2021, I don't blame you, neither was I. 2022 wasn't really on my radar. 2023 and 24, it just really took off. And in response, the FBI has done some good cross-border investigations. They actually went to Nigeria and were embedded with their Economic Crimes Commission in Nigeria. They managed to arrest 22 folks. They've extradited a few. Those extraditions are usually linked to a U.S. teen suicide. If you have to prioritize cases somehow, I guess that's a good way to do it. So some parents are seeing the perpetrators brought here and facing justice. There's plenty more that haven't been yet. And we are starting to see some good news. We got the FinCEN notice about sextortion, which I was waiting on, because until then, it was just kind of me yelling at financial institutions, this is a problem, you should do something about it, and trying to highlight that it's financial crime, like kind of a missing piece. They saw headlines, said that's terrible, but didn't realize the bad guys are doing this for money. We have a role.
For non-money experts, explain FinCEN and why that matters so much that they put out this bulletin.
So FinCEN is a Department of the Treasury, U.S. Department of Treasury, and they are in charge of all anti-money laundering laws in the United States. And they kind of tell the financial institutions, all types of financial institutions, whether you're a bank or a broker-dealer or a peer-to-peer platform or crypto firm, saying this is the baseline. Here are the things you need to look for. Here are the things you need to report. I mean, it's based on law, but they are the agency that's actually, putting out the rules and the guidance. So when they put out guidance, then that goes to all the financial institutions in the United States, and they no longer have a claim of ignorance. They can't say, well, we didn't know about it. We didn't know what to look for, which was hard. They didn't know. This was a new crime, aside from me writing about it for a year and a half. And then FATF, back in March, they released some red flags, which were helpful. And FinCEN built on those. So I was glad to see, because a lot of the red flags were solely about the victims, and that is useful. But we also need to know the red flags for the money mules, because that's so integral to these cases. Low dollar values, it can be very challenging for financial institutions to pick up on those $75 payments or $30 payments or the gift cards. So having a more robust red flags, not just on the victim side, but also on the money mule side and that international remittance side, that will give more opportunities for more types of financial institutions to pick up on this.
I cut you off. So you were saying that once FinCEN made this, published information about it, then what happened?
So we're starting to see some response, even between, I'd say some of the financial institutions have started changing their approach to financial products for teenagers, which I think is strongly needed, and also something I've written about extensively, to consider something that's called safety by design. And that's when any sort of technology product, whether it's a dating app or social media or entertainment, they consider upfront, before you roll it out, how is this going to affect the user's privacy, their safety, their exposure to unwanted harassment, things like that. But I think a lot of financial products and developers just didn't think about that. They said, we're financial, that doesn't apply to us, without thinking about that for all their customers, but especially for minors, for children. So we've seen things like some financial service apps have like a little 2-minute video of what is sextortion within the app, just to educate their consumers. Some have started changing their permissions, because when I wrote one of my really long pieces was walking through all those peer-to-peer payment platforms that I mentioned and walking through the different safety controls or lack of controls. Do they have parental notifications? Is there a dollar threshold a parent can send? Can your child send money to a stranger? Can your child send money to a stranger who's an adult? Because the peer-to-peer platforms, they know which accounts belong to children. So they should be able to identify when your child's sending money to an adult in another state, for instance, and never interacted with. That's also received a bunch of low dollar payments from a bunch of teenage boys and only boys. So there are red flags in settings.
So let me make sure I'm understanding, because I have in my network, that is how the mother found out that her son was in this situation, because she's sitting there having dinner with her friends and she's getting texts, she's getting notifications that her son was sending money. And so she reached out to find out why he was sending money. Is that your suggestion, that the bank should be more aware? Or tell me your suggestion about how that data should be looked at in terms of teenage boys sending money and what could be learned from that.
Sure. So I would think there's some settings for the apps, including things like Zelle, that should be by default privacy high, by default not searchable for teen accounts. And if they, by default, having a lower dollar value for a transaction, by default, parents need to approve transactions until the parent gets comfortable or approves this person. And right now, it really varies from app to app, whether they have defaults at all, or whether they're set high or off, or whether the parent has to go find them. So there's a lot of options that are hidden, or you don't even have the option, for example, to turn off Zelle on it. So to try and change some of that from the get-go, to have the privacy settings high, to have parental notifications high, and then have to downgrade it, because some apps you only get a monthly statement at the end if you're a parent. Some you get notification for each transaction. Some you get notifications for each transaction only with a new recipient on the other end. So if your kid has more than one, it's really tricky to know if you're up to date on what they're doing. But also, having a 14-year-old, their transactions might be different than a 17-year-old, and might get more comfortable as a parent. Okay, I don't need it for every transaction under $50, but if something's over 100, I do want to know about it. But the apps need to include that in their design to have some more parental notifications and alerts and permissions, and from the get-go have more privacy. We talk about that issue of, if I know I'm a bad guy and I know your phone number, I can look up to see whether you have certain payment apps, or I have your email address. I can find out whether you accept or whether you have an account at different platforms. And that seems to be, I know that's a way that bad guys are tracking down how to get payments from kids. So there could be more privacy controls around that.
So tell me more about your process. So you did all of this research. You evaluated all of these different apps, and then what did you do with this information?
Sure. So to be able to make any sort of recommendations, I had to understand where the shortcomings were, and I hadn't done a deep dive into every single app before. But even thinking about a framework, of for each app, what are their dollar threshold settings? Can you send this payment platform send money overseas, which is interesting. Some gift cards for gaming, you can transfer value overseas. To really map that out, and then that's it. People pause and say that. I'm like,
yeah.
For someone who works in this industry, I did not realize that some gift cards you can transfer value overseas, and that's falls within the loophole of gift cards. It's just not very common, but it does exist.
And that's so interesting, because we don't spend our lives trying to look for the loopholes. We don't spend our lives looking for the way to get these things done, but scammers do. Scammers have nothing but time to figure out that if I get him to buy that gift card, I don't have to do anything more than that, because that can be transferred to me here in Nigeria.
When they request gift cards, it's not just any gift card. They have specific gift cards they request, and they specifically request this particular gaming platform gift card, and even where to buy it. And if you don't have that, then they'll go with the tried and true Xbox and iTunes, because there's a high resale value, or they can buy the goods that they can reship for value. So it's not just a scattershot. We'll take your Olive Garden gift card. No, they have specific gift cards for a reason. And it's interesting. Part of my research is also looking at there's a sextortion forum, which is surprisingly a welcome place for victims. You never want to wander into an internet cesspool, but that particular forum actually gives good advice and doesn't allow more scammers to come on there to re-victimize. But it does provide a lot of information of, kids are uploading their screenshots. They want me to buy this particular gift card. they don't sell it at my gas station near my house. Where can I get it? And trying to understand the current methodologies too, because some of the indictments are from, a couple of years ago, and the bad guys are always evolving. If one door closes, they find the window on the other sides. I'm also trying to not fall behind the times as the scammers evolve. We need to make sure that we are providing the right information to the financial institutions of what to be on the lookout for.
I hear that about Reddit because I can only imagine you're a 17-year-old boy and you're in the middle of this thing and you really don't want to tell your parents and you don't know what to do. I never thought I'd say, well, thank goodness for Reddit, but thank goodness that there is a place that they can get some information that appears to be, at the moment at least, well administrated.
Yeah, that is surprisingly well administrated. I hope it continues to be that way. I know, but it's interesting. That's where teen boys go looking for advice, and at least there is some decent advice there. The blocking, block the contact on the social media. They will try, if you block them on one thing, they're going to try and that's, I think, also why they have them switched to multiple. Let's go from Instagram to Snapchat. So they have more ways to get you when you block them on one. And then they'll have, they have multiple personas on all these platforms to try and maintain the contact. But it does provide things like block the contact if you're going to report to the police. And that's a very personal decision. So also encourage you talking to your parents, trusted adult, to save images, screenshots. And if you did pay, then again, there's a lot of information that can be used by law enforcement tied to either the Facebook handles or Instagram handles and what emails are attached to those. If they are doing a payment, there is some KYC information for somebody. It might be a money mule. It may take a few more steps to figure out where the perpetrator is. But those money mules are getting 20% of these funds, and they are, without them, this
doesn't move. The money doesn't move.
It doesn't move. So they are right in it. And one other thing what I like to when I talk to financial institutions is the dollar values are low, and I understand it can be tricky, but these money mules are not just muling funds for sextortion. They're also involved in business email compromise. They're involved in romance scams. They're involved in grandparent scams. So if you are looking at an account and you think it's a money mule account, but you see these small, weird dollar values that are low from a bunch of different peer-to-peer platforms coming into the same account that's also getting, $300,000 for a house down payment that was hijacked in a business email compromise, don't discard those. They are not unimportant. Those are clues that may possibly be sextortion of children. So that's something I try to hammer in there and shoehorn into any conversation.
Yeah. So many pieces of this that are so interesting to me. Do you have much insight into, I know that I would be wondering this if I were a kid listening, is how often do they expose those pictures if you don't pay? Do you have any knowledge about that?
There has been some surveys of that, and it's about between 10 and 20%. And when they are sharing those images, it tends to be with like a Facebook group or Instagram group chat. And that's how sometimes the parents find out, or a girlfriend finds out. The kid hasn't told anyone, but it's not shared like on a widespread website or something. It's shared amongst your contacts, which is why they started on Instagram in the first place, because they wanted to know who to share those images with. So it happens. It's not the majority. Most of the time for the bad actors, they just move on to the next potential victim. It's not worth pursuing. But
Yeah.
it does.
Yeah. Well, I'm just thinking about the reporting numbers, and I would suspect for pig butchering, AARP will say that it's one in, or it's something like 15%. So 1 in 7 are going to report this. And I would have to think it would be even lower for teenage boys, that that the last thing they're going to do is report this to anyone.
And it's interesting. I had the opportunity to speak at local college here a couple of days ago, and talking to younger folks, they are probably none of them were minors, but they recently were, and their questions were interesting. So, and someone raised their hands. Well, we learned in our sex ed class that if we take even a nude image of ourselves, we can be charged with child pornography. So that's what's fresh in their mind. And, I had to go look at that. So, well, depending on what state the laws on the books may be written that way. In this realm of financial sextortion, the prosecutors going after this case are not going after the kids, but I have seen the threatening messages from the perpetrators telling the kid, well, you engaged in this, you can be charged. And that's another to keep them quiet. The bad guys know that those laws are on the books. It varies from state to state. And certainly in most cases, they're not going to be prosecuted as the victim. But is
Teenage
not a
boys
hard
don't know
tool.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tool in the bad guys,
Yes.
arsenal to try and keep kids quiet, which is awful.
Wow. Okay. Fascinating. What has been the reception to the work that you've done? Sometimes I find different industries more receptive to what I have to say than other industries. And I'm not asking you to name any names if you don't feel comfortable, but where do you feel like this is getting traction? Where do you feel like you're getting heard?
When I present in person and I talk about the kids' stories. You cannot get through that and not be moved. You might be able to scroll past my, Instagram or not have time to read a 4,000 page blog. But if you happen to be in the audience and hear just one of these kids' stories, it will anger you and hopefully inspire you to act. So right now it tends to be like one or two individuals within an institution that have heard about this or experienced it or knew someone who experienced it who feel passionately about it. The same thing with pig roaching, like passion can't be the sole fuel that moves us. We also need regulation and changes and red flags and requirements. So having the FinCEN notice, it is merely a notice. It's not anything stronger than that, but it does put the financial institutions on notice that this is a financial crime that is a government priority. And I was glad to hear that at a recent conference, one of the FinCEN executives said, if we write a notice about it, that means it is priority for this administration. Glad to hear it. Good. So that if
Yeah,
you
I
don't
recognize.
hear it yourself, but this administration, they make something a priority, it should be a priority for your institution as well.
Remember when pig butchering came out in a FinCEN bulletin and they asked you to note that this was pig butchering, and that was a major win because we hadn't been acknowledging it, and we were very busy debating whether we should even call it pig butchering. So I was really grateful for that. What are your recommendations? What would you like to see happen?
Sure. I would like financial institutions to think about teen products as a product for children. Is the product for a child the same product you would offer for an adult? And if not, how would you change it to make it appropriate for children? And that kind of walks through several different elements we talked about of privacy, controls, notification, maybe some escalating flexibility as the child gets older or has more experience with the product, but not just to roll out the same adult product and slap teen on it. Don't just put on, some neon colors and say, now it's for kids. It's not. And also think about maybe technology, call it red team. Red team your product. If I was a bad guy and I specifically wanted to target children, how would I do that? These same safety controls will also be very helpful for the targeting of adults. As I said, it was the second most reported crime to IC3 was extortion also for adults. Again, having some of the privacy features. If you send someone money, are they automatically also going to know your phone number and email address? That seems a bit excessive. Maybe we don't need to have that every time. Or is that a safety feature in other situations where now we know how to track down the funds? So it really needs some thoughtful
Love that advice to red
approach.
team your own product. Start thinking about how can this be abused? What could go wrong here?
Especially for the teen products. It just seems that they were rolled out without much thought about how are teenagers going, even other things aside from this, like can your teenager send funds to a gambling website or, an adult
Yes.
content website, like other things that maybe children shouldn't be accessing or paying for with your product. So that goes beyond the small world to other dangers for children. And also the other thing I want to mention is, can an adult strangers send your child money? Because that's somewhere the CSAM is coming from, of adults paying children for self-generated images. So both ways, not just one directional, both ways. How can that product be abused for a child exploitation specifically? Really walk through that and be thoughtful about it and use those red flags from FinCEN and FATF. But if you want to understand what's behind those red flags, then read my work, read or listen to anything Paul Raphael has ever done. And you'll understand why is it a red flag that all the money from this peer-to-peer is being sent out between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. Well, until you realize that's when a teenager is alone in his room and he's getting calls. They don't just text them or message them. They will call the child multiple times throughout the night to put pressure on them. And that's when they're depleting their...
Scary.
Yeah, it's horribly scary. I mean, the language they use and the messages are awful, but let alone, and then calling, that's what raises the stress even more. And let's just be more thoughtful and red team your product.
So I know you were just on the ACAMS main stage in Vegas. You've been out and you remind me of my days in pig butchering, where you'll talk about this anytime, all the time.
Yes, I will.
So what's coming up next for you? What are you looking forward to?
So I'm glad next week I have it is Cybersecurity Month, and I like getting to speak to audiences outside of the financial space. They have different questions, different things I hadn't thought of because I'm so grounded in my world that I'm like, oh, that is a good question. Why aren't we doing it this way? To be able to cross-pollinate, share information, but also learn from them. So I'm excited to do that. And a lot of folks that are not in either cyber or right now in financial crime. We're just like, I work for a healthcare business. We're doing our annual cyber awareness, but I'm going to talk about sextortion. I'm getting it in there. And then I have some meetings with internet crimes against children to try and teach those folks how to use financial data, because I think that's
Love
this missing piece where there's folks who I'm learning the language of that space, and I had to learn that to understand, but they may also not know about suspicious activity reports and what kind of data is in there. And we also collect IP addresses. So you can match that IP address to an IP address used to be sending an image to try and bridge the gaps between the internet crime law enforcement folks. A lot of that falls on the shoulders of local and state with this federal database that they may not know, especially now that we have the sextortion keyword that financial institutions need to file. Like, that's going to be a wealth of information that I don't want to get stuck in a silo, that folks who could use it don't know it exists. So trying to bridge those worlds.
You know, I come from sexual assault prosecution and investigation, and I think that there is so much that we don't know in law enforcement about the financial industry and about the kind of information that's available. And I'm definitely seeing this in my pig butchering work, is that the more we can overlap law enforcement and the financial industry, the better off everybody is. Everybody has a better idea of what's happening on the ground floor in their neighborhood and what kind of information is available to help them investigate these cases, slow down payments, and disrupt the industry. I appreciate what you're saying about looking forward to getting into some spaces that you don't ordinarily be.
And it really rounds out when I'm able to give advice. Like, I had to borrow safety by design from tech to tell financial institutions, this is what you should be doing. Not the safety by design has been widely embraced by all social media, and there's plenty of room, but like, there's a framework. We don't need to recreate the wheel every time. If something is a good framework and we can apply it, I have no shame in borrowing from another industry.
Yep.
One financial institution is doing something great, I'm going to shout on the roof for them, say, look, this is what they're doing. Look what they're doing. You can do it too. Like, just to try and keep the ball rolling. That it felt for a while the ball was not rolling, but now we definitely have some momentum with changes from regulators, from government stances, and also some industry is catching up now, and they're showing some, whether it's required or grassroots interest, it's moving now.
Yeah. Well, I love ending on an optimistic note, and I personally am grateful for the work that you do as a mother of 2 teenage boys with people that they know that have been victimized in this way. I'm grateful for your work, and I'm grateful for Paul's work, and I'm grateful for everyone else out there who is really looking into this horrific crime. And so thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I'm grateful for your time, Alison.
Well, thank you, Erin. Thanks for having me, and thanks for showing me the way to approach a crime from a strategic whole of society approach. Like, I learned that from you, so thank you.
You've just heard the truth. Now, what will you do with it? Subscribe to Stolen and share it with someone you care about, because anyone can be a target. Visit OperationShamrock.org to learn more, get resources, and join the fight. And follow Erin West on LinkedIn. Stolen is real stories, real people, and a crisis we can't afford to ignore.